Okay, so in this unit, this is our contracts unit. We'll start with the foundational chapter, formation of contracts, and then we get into performance and breach, and then we'll spend less time with the sale and lease, which is the UCC chapter 12. So this is chapter 10, which is how we form the contract. Chapter 11 is what happens when somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do, i.e. breach of contract. And then chapter 12 is UCC, which we'll spend comparatively less time on, and I'll flesh that out when we get there. Okay, um, so when we're talking about contract law, we need to understand that there are two distinct sources of contract law. The first is the common law, all right, which is effectively case law and established practice and tradition. All right, and there are so generally we're not talking statutory law. There are restatements where scholars have attempted to write down existing established case law and practice, performance, and tradition. All right. And that's what we're going to be focusing on primarily in chapters 10 and 11. Chapter 12 is the Uniform Commercial Code, which is statute, and we'll talk about how that came to be, what a contract is. All right. So a contract is really just a promise that the law is going to hold you to. Right. And why do we have contract law? Because it facilitates business, right? This course is the legal environment of business, and people would be much less willing to contract, or you contract only on a cash basis, if parties didn't have to live up to the promises that they make. So that's why contract law exists, because it facilitates business and commerce. Okay, so we'll use the term reasonable person a lot, all right? But before we get there, the framework for determining when a contract exists is the objective theory of contracts, all right? The idea is that whether a contract exists is not an opinion thing, it's a fact thing. In other words, it's not subjective, it's objective. All right? So when determining whether a contract exists and what the terms are, we look not to what the party who actually agreed to the contract thought, but rather we look to what a reasonable person would have thought in the same circumstances. All right? The facts are what the party said when they were contracting, how the party acted or appeared, and the circumstances surrounding the transaction. All right? And we'll get knee deep into this. We'll use Lucy versus Zemer, which is a landmark case, to flesh this out. But to just for a quick hitter hypothetical, right? If I, let's say I am in my car, it's a brand new car, and it won't start, right? And I get out and kick the tire and say, I'll sell this car to the first person who hands me a $5 bill. And then someone jumps out of the bushes and hands me a $5 bill. Do we have a contract? And the answer is no, because a reasonable person wouldn't have thought that that was serious. That just sounds like an outward expression of my anger and frustration in that moment. All right. So to have a valid contract, we need these 4 elements, right? Each is required, and if any is not present, then you don't have a contract. So agreement, which means one party has made an offer which the other has accepted. All right. That's called the meeting of the minds. Consideration. You have to get something for your promise. If I contract with Farmer Brown to buy 10 bushels of corn for $100, well, I'm getting 10 bushels of corn and the farmer's getting $100. We're both getting consideration as part of the deal. Courts are reluctant to enforce contracts that lack consideration. If I agree to give you $100, that's not a contract, that's a gift, right? Contractual capacity, which means you've reached the age of majority in that state. Typically it's 18, and then I can enter into a contract without, and I'm not, I don't have a mental defect, I'm not insane, I have the capacity to understand and competency to understand that I am in fact entering into a contract. And then legality. Courts will not enforce contracts for an illegal purpose. So a usurious loan, very high interest rate loan, contracts to hire a hitman to kill, a spouse or ex-spouse, those are illegal contracts. Courts will not enforce those.